The Artifacts of Mount Independence and the Stories They Tell. A series of brief explorations of Revolutionary War artifacts from Mount Independence on Lake Champlain in Orwell, Vermont.
Greetings and welcome to Vermont State Historic Site, Mount Independence, located in Orwell, Vermont. I'm Paul Andriscin. I'm one of the site interpreters here at Mount Independence, and today we're going to be talking about foodways and what the soldiers and people that were here ate during the American Revolution. Ideally, the rationing for both the British Army and the Colonial Army was very similar in that each man was expected to get 1 pound of beef or 3/4 of a pound of pork per day, about 1/3 of a cup of peas, beans, rice, or what they called Indian meal, which would be cornmeal, along with 1 pound of flour, and this would be implemented with vinegar, salt, pepper, and 1 quart of spruce beer or cider per day, along with 9 gallons of molasses per week per 100 men. Now this would be able to be used for meals, and soldiers were expected to make meals 3 times a day, the biggest meal being breakfast, the smallest meal being supper time, believe it or not. At any rate, the main source of food was the beef. Now, the beef was a very large animal, as we know, and it is quite a bit of different areas in the beef, some of which are very tough, some of which are very tender, and it would depend on what the men would be getting as to how much what they would get. And keep in mind that we're dealing with a mess of men between 6 and 8 people, so that 1 pound of beef would turn into 8 pounds of beef. That 1/3 of a cup of peas or beans would turn into about 2.5 cups of peas or beans, and they would be able to make a sizable meal and a very nutritious meal for themselves if they knew what they were doing. Keep in mind also that both the British Army and the Colonial Army did have women with them, and most of these women may have experience in cooking and would be able to help with some of the cooking chores. Now, the beef, again, is a very large animal, and the farther down you go on the beef, the more tough it's going to get. The prime and good cuts are up on the top here, your rib, your steaks, your rump roast, etc., even your chuck roast at this point. But as you go down, even into the neck is very tough because the muscles in the neck move the head back and forth. As you get into the shanks and the belly and everything else, it's going to be tougher, and it's going to take more preparation to make those. Now, what we have here, this is a cow's metatarsal. It's probably from the front. It would be right in this area here. There's very little meat on this, and these are 2 bones that would be leading to the hoof. What the person who was making this would probably have done would be put this in a pot, perhaps with the beans, the peas, the flour, and making some sort of a soup, stew, gruel. General Anthony Wayne made the proclamation that all meat should be not fried, so therefore that would give more of a chance to make some kind of a nutritious meal as opposed to frying it. We know that some of the meat was fried. You can tell by the bones. We'll talk about that in a minute. This bone, as you can see, is fairly shiny. That means it was probably thrown into a pot. It's what you call pot polished, as is this. This is a beef humerus, which is the shoulder up in this area here. This is this bone. Again, it is very shiny. The marrow has not been extracted from this. I don't know why, but it was probably put into a pot to make a stew or soup of some sort. Another bone we have here is a beef femur from the hind leg. It has been opened. It is scraped, and it was probably pot polished. The marrow was taken out of this, and there was a way to make a nutritious meal using flour, where you mix flour with water and you would make a thick paste. You could twist that on a stick, as I used to do in Boy Scouts many years ago, and when you cook it over the fire, then you could take the marrow and spread it on it, and it would be a very nutritious meal. Pieces like the oxtail, which is loaded with collagen, would be a prime piece of meat to give you a very nutritious meal. The head, there's a recipe I have in a 1862 Army of the Potomac cookbook, but it would go back to the Revolution, where the head of the cow would be baked in a hole and be able to be used for all the cheek meat and the brain and everything else that was in there. Offal, which is things that we look at today and a lot of people don't eat, but it was very popular during the colonial period. The tongue, the heart, the liver, the tripe, which is the stomach, the kidneys, all those cuts were very desirable and searched after by many of the people. There's a piece along the trachea that was known as the Weason, and Joseph Plum Martin, who wrote probably one of the best diaries that we have of a soldier of the American Revolution, talks about going to one of the dumps where the slaughterhouse was and finding the trachea and pulling the meat off the side of the trachea so they had extra meat, and would have been one of the cuts that might have been overlooked by some of the butchers that were here. Again, the farther down the beef you got, the more tough to take the preparation, and more preparation you would have had to do with it, and it was one of the main sources of food that was available here on the mountain and other camps in the American Revolution period. Thank you very much.